What's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we're doing the what's next on Erislandy Lara, the reigning WBA Middleweight Champion of the world, following a dominant second-round knockout victory over Australian Michael Zerafa, as Lara retained the middleweight title with that victory on the March 30th Amazon Prime pay-per-view undercard. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So this fight right here was a good one. Well, it was a good win for Lara over Zerafa to get that out of the way. But now, you know, what is he gonna do next? Lara's just, I mean, year after year, he fights once a year, and you know, now, and it's just went the last 3 or 4 years now, just to where he fights pretty much nobodies. You know, I mean, his last fight was, it was Spike O'Sullivan, who was a faded contender, and he stopped him in, I think, 8 rounds. That was on the Tank Davis Rolly Romero card. Shit, what? Damn near 2 years ago. Yeah, it was almost 2 years ago was his last fight. Just shy of 2 years. Prior to that, he dominated Cornflake LaManna, dominated him in 1 round to capture the WBA regular belt at middleweight here, the vacant one. And like, I don't know, he just hasn't really fought that often, and you know, doesn't seem interested in fighting more than once a year. So, but after a 2-round destruction, which really, and now that he's the official WBA middleweight champion, is the WBA going to put pressure on him to fight? You know, or is the PBC going to expect him to fight one of their other guys in the division? Let's run through the top 10 and see what possibly could be next for the reigning middleweight champion. We start with, you know, any of the guys that had dropped out. You know, no, I'm not going to discuss those guys. Let's start with Janabek Alamanhalai, which will be a unification bout. He's the current WBO IBF middleweight champion. Would Lara want to take a risk against Janabek? If he did, right now, he'd be supremely confident. But Janabek is not a guy, is not Michael Zerafa. Janabek punches hard, and he's younger and fresher. I don't think Lara would want to cross the street, you know, and the PBC and Top Rank work together to make that fight. Honestly, I just don't see it. Then there's Chris Eubank Jr. I think Eubank is willing to work with pretty much any of the networks. He's proven that. But what's he really willing to do? Is he willing to fight a guy like Lara? I think he should. I think it's a good matchup. I think it would make sense for both fighters. And, you know, it'd be good for both fighters to move up the ladder. And, you know, if Eubank really wants a world title against a name opponent, Lara's your guy. I mean, I know he's commented before that Janabek's not a name. He's not. You're right. He's not a big name right now. But Lara is established, and he's coming off of a nice knockout win. Why not Eubank sign on for later in the year, and these two guys make it happen? I think it makes a lot of sense, and I do think it's possible. Carlos Adames. It depends on what happens with the WBC. To be honest, if the WBC finally wisens up and strips Jermall Charlo of their title, because he's coming up on 3 years of not defending the belt. He has not fought in the middleweight division for the WBC middleweight title since June of 2021. If they wisen up and strip him of the belt and upgrade Carlos Adames, Adames is with the PBC, him and Lara to unify belts, it probably would happen, in my opinion. I think it probably will happen. So I'm hoping they wisen up and strip Charlo finally of that belt. Then there's former junior middleweight champion Liam Smith. Liam Smith's coming off of the loss to Chris Eubank in their rematch. last year. I don't think Lara would be completely opposed to it, but I think Top Rank or DAZN, whatever Smith's with, would have to work with the PBC, and I'm leaning towards the less likely because I don't think that's probably going to happen. But he is number 9 in the WBA as of the beginning of the year, so maybe Lara might say, hey, optional defense, Liam Smith's got a name, I'll fight him. But honestly, I'm leaning towards the less likely. The PBC likes to stay in-house. Lara likes to stay in-house with PBC guys. Jamal Charlo, the WBC champion. I mean, if Charlo decides he wants to come back to the middleweight division, the WBC is probably going to order him to fight Carlos Adames as interim champion. So I would think a unification bout would be off the table. Or if he really wanted to come back and he wanted to fight Lara next at 160, then I think the WBC might approve of a unification, but the winner would have to fight Adames, which makes sense. And I think Lara would be down for both. So it's possible if Charlo actually wants to come back to 160. Who knows? Speaking of Charlo, what about Jermell Charlo? Jermell fought at 168 in his last fight. Returning to 154, he said he'd want to do that. But does he really want to cut down to 154 to make weight? I think Jermell might be more inclined to fight a veteran like Erislandy Lara and then start welcoming those other guys to come up and fight him at 160 that are at 154. The Sebastian Fendoras, Erickson Lubins, which would be a rematch. The Tim Zeus. I think he's more inclined to maybe do that, but I do think Charlo wants to fight guys like Crawford and Spence also. More Crawford, because Spence is a good friend of his. But that might be a way to get Crawford to come all the way up to 160. So there's definitely a lot of options on the table here for Jermell, for Lara, with those names right there. Some of the names now in the back half of the top 10, former champ Vicente Gualtieri. You know what's funny is I think Gualtieri would be willing to work with anybody. He's a foreign fighter. I think he's from Germany. I think he might be, open to pretty much fighting anybody. But, and these are the kind of guys that Lara has been fighting. Second level, third level, B level, C level type opponents that he can dominate. And I think he might take on a guy like him, what's his name, like Gualtieri. But I don't know if he would beat a guy he would beat him in my opinion, but I don't know if he'd want him after Jonabek just destroyed him by knockout. So I'm going to lean towards the less likely. Then there's Austin Williams. He's currently number 2 in the WBA right now. Would he fight the undefeated Williams? I don't think so, because it wouldn't be a mandatory fight, and Austin Williams is with, I believe he's with DAZN. Then there's Elijah Garcia. Now this one is interesting. Would Lara want to fight a fighter half of his age? Lara's 40. Elijah Garcia is 20 years old, but Elijah Garcia is the WBA's #1 ranked contender. Now, would the WBA order this fight following Lara making a mandatory defense against Zerafa? I think there's a yes and no answer to that. Yes, because Lara waited around so long to make the mandatory against Zerafa, they might. Or no, because Lara doesn't want that fight with Elijah Garcia next. He might want to wait on a mandatory till next year, and then that could ease the way to keep the belt on a PBC guy. That's the question. Would Lara want to fight a guy half of his age in Elijah Garcia? It's interesting. Shane Mosley Jr. Mosley Jr. would be a name. I think Lara would like to get a name on his resume. He might offer a fight like that to Shane. But I don't know, because Shane is with DAZN. Now, I think Eddie Hernan Matchroom would accept a title fight at 160 with Lara, and I think Lara might be inclined to give that opportunity. So I do think that one's on the table. Then other fighters, Myra don't see that one. Dennis Radovan, he's the highest rated fighter in the IBF, so I don't see it. Hamza Shiraz, he's highly ranked in the WBO right now, so I think, and he's more on the top ranked side, so I don't see them coming together. I think he's top rank or DAZN, one of the two. Thomas Lamana in a rematch, there's no point in that. He's WBA's number 4. Andre Mikhailowicz, a high-rated fighter in the IBF. Nathan Haney is highly rated in the WBO, but not a big name. I don't see him taking a risk. Connor Coyle is the WBA's number 5 contender. Maybe this he might. Yeah, this one is a possibility because he's a WBA highly rated fighter, but I think he's also undefeated. He's not a big name. I don't know if Lara would be interested. Danny Garcia. That one, Danny's ranked number 6 in the WBA, and I still believe Lara wants to make that fight with Danny at some point. And considering he's in the WBA rankings, I think it's possible. Sadly, but it is possible. And then finally, you got Demetrius Andrade, who's coming off the loss to David Benavidez and contemplating moving back down to 160. I don't think Lara would take that fight, even though it's a PBC fight. So, honestly, I really think Charlo, if he wants to fight at 160, it's possible. I think the other Charlo, if he wants to fight at 160, Jermell, it's possible. I think a unification bout with Carlos Adames is possible if he gets upgraded for Lara. And then I also think Elijah Garcia, if the WBA mandates that fight, I think Danny Garcia is probably the most logical for Lara in his mind, because that's the fight that he wanted already. And for some reason, it didn't come to fruition. So now that the fight didn't happen, he got his mandatory out of the way. Maybe Lara might want to fight Danny at that catch weight of 155. So it's going to be interesting to see what Lara decides to do next. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, but I've come to expect that rarely happens when it comes to Lara, sooner rather than later. So it's going to have to wait around and see what goes down. But that's it. That's what I got. That's my what's next on the reigning WBA middleweight champion of the world, Erislandy Lara, following a dominating second-round knockout victory over his mandatory challenger, Michael Zerafa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.